Welcome to our Biosimilars training program. This event is brought to you in partnership with the World Patients Alliance. My name is Nicole Sheahan, and I'm president of the Global Colon Cancer Association. This two-day training event is designed for advocates representing all disease states. We'll be providing you with education about biosimilars, as well as a toolkit for you to utilize in your own advocacy efforts. During this training, you can submit questions via the chat feature or email us at biosimilars@globalcca.org. You can also reach out to us via social media. Our handle is @globalcrc. Thank you to the sponsors and partners of this training program: Amgen, the Alliance for Safe Biologic Medicines, and to the World Patients Alliance. It is now my pleasure to introduce our co-founder of the Global Colon Cancer Association, Andrew Spiegel.
Hello, everyone. I am Andrew Spiegel, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Global Colon Cancer Association, and it's my sincere pleasure to welcome you to our Biosimilars training program. We created the Biosimilars training program because we have been at the forefront of biosimilar policy, both in the United States, but around the world over the last decade. And because we need more patient advocate organizations and more advocates to join us to ensure that the patient voice remains strong in all biosimilar policy developments. And I'm delighted that we have partnered with the World Patients Alliance in this endeavor. The WPA is the largest patient organization on the planet that crosses all diseases and all geographic regions, and it is made up of more than 350 patient organizations from 111 countries. So we're really proud to partner with the World Patients Alliance, and we welcome its members here to our biosimilar training program. We need more advocates in this space. As I said, there have been a small handful of patient advocates that have been involved in the biosimilar policy arena over the last decade. And while we have been doing a good job, it has been quite a challenge to represent the billions of patients across the world. And so getting partnerships like the one we have with the WPA and bringing along the Alliance for Safe Biologic Medicines, which has been a leader in this space over the last decade, is going to really help us deliver to you over the next 2 days some really high quality information that you will be able to take back to your communities. A huge part of being an effective patient advocate is being informed about the issues that affect your healthcare and your treatment. And biosimilars policies is an incredibly important issue that impacts patients, but patient advocacy groups, as I've said, in general, are missing at the table on these critical topics. So we have brought together some of the strongest patient advocates in the biosimilar space from around the world, as well as some of the leading healthcare providers involved in the space and experts, all from around the world, with our goal being to build a network of patient advocacy organizations and patient advocates that will be able to engage and ensure that the patient remains at the forefront of these health policy discussions and that patients' best interests remain at the forefront. The issues that you're going to learn about over the next couple of days affect all patients around the world in most disease areas. Some of this material is complicated. You'll see that, but we promise you that we have made this as patient-friendly as possible. You're going to learn a lot of new words and new concepts, but don't worry, we define these terms multiple times as we go along. And we also have a list of definitions available to you, and all the sessions that you'll see over the next 2 days are being recorded, and they'll be available on demand if you want to go back and watch them or share them with others in your organization or other patient organizations. So the first definition I want to tell you about is a biologic medicine. What is a biologic medicine? So the best way I explain this, and I will use this analogy a couple of times, is that traditionally when we go to the pharmacy and we pick up a medicine that a doctor or practitioner has prescribed for us, it's a chemical compound. And any pharmaceutical company can make that chemical compound just as good as the next pharmaceutical company because they're just following a recipe. And in fact, if I give you the recipe to a really small molecule like aspirin, you could make aspirin if you follow that recipe just as good as a company that's been making aspirin for 50 years, because you're just following the same recipe. And anybody that follows that same recipe can make that drug just as good. And that's what we know and we commonly call generics. So we know that when a doctor or healthcare provider gives you a prescription and you take it to the pharmacist and they take it to the pharmacy, that pharmacist may, in fact, switch your medicine to a generic. And why not? It's the same medicine. It's the same chemical compound. And as long as both companies or multiple companies have access to those chemical compounds, they all can make your drug just as good as the other one. And there shouldn't and really isn't anything to worry about when we're talking about generics versus brand name drugs. But biologics are different. Biologics are made from living organisms. So think of it this way. I could give you the recipe to make a biologic drug, but unless I give you the raw materials, the exact same raw materials, you can't make the exact biologic drug. Why is that? Because you don't have access to my cell line. I own this cell line that I'm creating these drugs out of, these cells, these proteins that you're going to hear a lot about over the next couple of days. When another company tries to get that recipe and recreate it like you would think a generics company could do, they can't make it identical because they don't have your cell line. But that doesn't mean they can't make a copy of that medicine that works just fine for you. And that's what are called biosimilars. They're not called generics because they're not generics. They're not chemically identical. They're safe, they're effective, and they're expected to work exactly the same as the originator drug. So there's your first definition. A biologic drug is a drug made from a living organism, not a chemical compound. We can't make exact copies like a generic, so there's no such thing as a generic biologic. We call those biosimilars. They're very close copies of the original biologic medicine. And regulators in your country, like in the US, the FDA, or Health Canada, or the TSA in Australia, or the EMA in Europe, in the EU, they all have policies in place that allow these very safe and very effective medicines to come to markets. So what's this all about? Well, we have to make sure that the new policies that governments are putting into place for these new drugs that are coming out are patient friendly, and that they serve the best interest of the patients, not the people that are making the drugs, not the people that are selling the drugs, not the intermediaries, not governments, not the payers. The patients have to be at the forefront. And that's why it's important that all patient advocates have an understanding of what biologics and biosimilars are and what the policy issues are associated with these types of drugs. It's important that people understand the terminology, biologic drug, the original biologic drug that was made by the inventor of the drug. Sometimes they call that the original biologic, or the originator product, or the innovator product, or the reference product. All of those mean it's the drug that was made by the original company that made that drug. And that is what the biosimilar is trying to copy. So we've already talked about how a biosimilar is not a generic. It's very close, it's safe, and they work. But it is a different drug than the original. And these biosimilar drugs are great for patients because they can really bring down treatment costs. In the United States, biosimilars, which have only been around for 7 or 8 years, typically sell for anywhere from 15 to 40% less than the originator brand product, the reference product that we talked about, the reference product that they're based off of. So automatically there's a 15 to 40% savings for the payer and the health system. And that means big savings, big savings. That could be billions of dollars. And what we hope is that additional savings, that money that the government, or your health insurer, your payer, saved by using biosimilars, we hope that money will be reinvested back into the system, which means more access for more patients, more access to things that make the patient experience better, things that you'll hear about from some of our speakers over the next few days. So there are some great benefits to biosimilars, because one of the things what we really hope for is that it means lower out-of-pocket costs for patients, because we know that out-of-pocket costs, deductibles, copays in systems where there are private payers, and even where there's government, that can be pretty hefty when we're talking about biologic medicine. So those are some of the issues that we're working on, some of the challenges that biosimilars create for patients. What happens if you're on a biologic drug, an originator product, a reference product, as we call them, and you're doing really well, and maybe it took a really long time for your healthcare provider and you as a team member to find that cocktail of medicines that is doing really well for you. So what if you're on this biologic drug, you're doing really well, but now your government or your private insurance company or the payer says, we want to switch you to a less expensive drug in order to save money? Well, that comes with a whole host of issues for a stable patient. If you're doing really well on a biologic medicine, do you really want to switch to a biosimilar medicine? Or if you're doing really well on a biosimilar medicine, the person paying or responsible for you getting that medicine may want to switch you to another biosimilar medicine after a few months, if they get a better price from a different supplier of that biosimilar drug. Or they may want to switch you back to an originator or the original drug. In other words, they want to switch you from either the originator to a biosimilar, or a biosimilar to another biosimilar, or a biosimilar to the originator. And these switches can happen just as often as the contracts end between the buyers of these drugs and the suppliers of the drugs. And so that creates issues for patients, and that we advocate on all the time. Will you and your physicians still have access to the drug that works for you? And who gets to decide when that switch will take place, and how often you can or should be switched, and what policies are in place to make sure that this is being done safely, and who controls your treatment? Is it going to be you and your physician, or is it going to be the person that's paying for the drug? Is it going to be a policymaker? Is it going to be the government? These are the kind of issues we're going to be going over in this training program, and the kind of issues that we advocate for all the time. The Global Colon Cancer Association has traveled throughout the world advocating on patient-friendly policies. We've been in front of the WHO numerous times to talk about the patient viewpoints on these biosimilar policies that are coming out. We've been talking to regulators all around the world, from US to Canada to the EU to Australia to South America, throughout Europe. Really all over the world, we've been going to talk about biosimilar policies to ensure that these policies are patient-friendly and centered around what patients need. So over the next couple of days, you're going to hear from patients all over the world about their experiences, both good and bad. And you're going to hear what physicians all over the world think about these issues, and you're going to find out what you can do to get involved. So we're going to give you all of the tools that you will need to be the expert, as I said, in your own organization when it comes to biosimilar policy. By the end of this program, you'll not only be the expert, but that we will give you all the tools that you will need to educate others in your patient community. So let me give you just a little bit more information about biosimilars. Biosimilars have been around in Europe since 2006, and they've got about 70 of them available to patients. Biosimilars are relatively new in most of the world besides that. The really complex biosimilars, like those that are used for cancer or other autoimmune conditions called monoclonal antibodies, they're even newer, and they've only been approved over the last couple of years. So these drugs are really new to the world, and new biosimilars are being approved all of the time by regulators all around the world, often many different biosimilars copying an original reference or originator product. Here in the US, where I'm based, we have 33 approved, 21 on the market, and a whole bunch scheduled to come next year. So quite the biosimilar success story, as you're going to hear about from some of our speakers, for only having biosimilars for a really short time. And it's critical that patients in the US and around the world know what's happening with these medicines, because these policies surrounding them will most definitely affect your treatment. And biosimilars are not going away. They are certainly here to stay, and are becoming very much a mainstay of treatment. Some of the biosimilars in the US have achieved 60, 70, 80% market share. Some of them in Europe, 90% market share. There really has been quite a biosimilar success story so far, certainly in the EU, and certainly arguably the US has come out of the gate really successfully launching a number of biosimilars in a really short time, the majority of which have been approved in the last year and a half to 2 years. As more and more patients start using these biosimilars, we've seen that the US uptake levels are starting to approach those seen in Europe. Europe, as I've said, is widely regarded as having the most robust biosimilar program in the world, but the US is definitely catching up. We've seen in general uptakes in some places, as I said, in Europe, of 90% of certain drugs. Generally speaking, in Denmark, biosimilar market share is at 63%. At the UK, it's 45%. Germany, 40%. France, 34%. There's definitely a lot of uptake for drugs that have really been around in a relatively short period of time. One thing that I can't emphasize enough in this introduction is that as more biosimilars become available in different countries, increased competition has driven down prices. They've driven down those prices not only of the biosimilars, but also of the originator biologics on which they're based. So think about that. The more competition that comes to market, the more prices come down of both the biosimilars and the originator products. And that's what we call a win for patients and our health systems, because ideally, this should free up the money to spend on other treatments and other patients who should have increased access. And as you'll hear from some of our speakers, what is required for that system to work is transparency. Patients need to know that if they're being switched to a less expensive drug in order to save the government or the payers money, that there's going to be a benefit for the patient as well. Lower copays, no deductibles, no out-of-pocket costs, greater access to things that make the delivery of medicine easier, add-ons at the hospital level or at the therapy level, things like that, or a greater pool of patients that could otherwise access this biologic treatment because of the savings that have come from biosimilars. But most of all, first of all, patient safety and quality treatment have to be at the forefront of the biosimilar policy discussion. Forget about the cost savings. We have to make sure first that these drugs are safe, that they are of high quality, just like the originator drugs, and that the quality of treatment for patients is not compromised as payers and governments and insurers seek to get those savings. And we also think that it's important that some of those savings get passed on to the patient. Over the next 2 days, you're going to hear all about how these policies surrounding biologics and biosimilars are going to affect you as a patient or as a patient advocate or as a caregiver. These will help us all work together to make sure that we can get health and savings benefits for biosimilars while making sure these policies work for patients all over the world. And as I said, this training is so important that the GCCA is partnering with the World Patients Alliance to offer a biosimilars training certificate to our attendees who attend this program. The other thing that we will leave you with is a patient advocacy toolkit for biosimilars that will contain a lot of this information that you will need, that you can share with people in your organization, position statements, fact sheets, sample letters, everything that you will need to get yourself and your organization engaged on these important biosimilar policy issues. So thank you for coming and enjoy the next 2 days.
It is my pleasure to introduce Hussain Jafri, Executive Director of the World Patients Alliance. Hussain has worked for 15 years with the World Health Organization, where he served as Vice Chair of the Advisory Group of the WHO's Patients for Patient Safety program. Hussain was instrumental in developing the London Declaration at that program's first meeting back in 2005. This declaration aims to empower patients and families to build a global network, partnering with health professionals and policymakers to make healthcare services safer, more integrated, and more people-centered. Hussain is the former chair of the International Alliance of Patient Organization, also known as IAPO, and he is the founding director of World Patients Alliance, who is GCCA's partner in this biosimilar training program. Hussain will tell you about the great work that World Patients Alliance is doing around the globe to educate patients, build a patient network, and keep patients at the forefront of health policy discussions. He will also discuss the certificate of training available to attendees of this two-day program. Thank you to Hussain and the World Patients Alliance for their partnership.
Hello, my name is Hussain Jafri, and I'm the Executive Director of the World Patients Alliance, also known as WPA. I welcome all the participants with special welcome to WPA member organizations that are also joining us for this important training. Currently, the World Patient Alliance has over 350 member patient organizations in over 111 countries of the world, thus making us the largest international patient organization that is working across all disease areas and in all regions of the world. WPA represents the voice of over 1 billion patients worldwide. The WPA provides a platform to empower and elevates the voices of patients so that they can play an active role in all stages of healthcare. And our vision is that all patients must have access to safe, high quality, and affordable healthcare everywhere in the world. Much of the work we do is providing patient education and information, and that's through webinars, workshops, and other meetings. And most importantly, partnering with patient groups across the globe. And last year alone, we held more than 800 such events as part of World Health Organization's World Patient Safety Day on 7th of September. This is a testament that we are not only a global advocacy organization that's working at the international level, but we are also directly linked and connected with patients and communities right at the grassroots level through our member patient organizations all over the world. We also emphasize partnerships and collaborations as important tools to impact healthcare policy. While healthcare policies differ from countries to countries, patients deserve the same high quality treatment. And by working together, we can make this goal a reality. Biosimilars have the potential to greatly increase access to biologic treatments that would otherwise be too expensive for many patients. But patients must speak with one voice, as the world governments basically are creating policies around biosimilars to ensure that the safety, quality, and affordability are not compromised. But in order to achieve this, patients first need to well informed with biosimilars. WPA is proud to be partner with Global Colon Cancer Association to represent and present this two-day education training program, basically focusing on topics of biosimilars. And by the end of this program, you will understand not only the basics of biosimilars, but many of the ways that patient safety and empowerment can be harmed, and when biosimilar policies are not made with the patient in mind. So at the end of day 2, you will receive a certificate of training from GCC and the WPA, showing that you have received this advanced training on the topic of biosimilar medicines. We encourage you to share that what you have learned with other groups and other patients as well. You will also receive a patient advocacy toolkit that will show you ways to use your new knowledge to make sure that the patient voice is well heard as your region and your country makes their own biosimilar policies. So finally, I encourage you to consider joining the World Patients Alliance in order to stay informed about important global developments that require patient engagement. To learn more about World Patients Alliance, please visit our website at www.worldpatientsalliance.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hussain, for the work that you do. We encourage all NGOs that are participating in this training program to learn more and consider joining the World Patients Alliance. Andy shared critical information about why it is important for patient advocates and organizations to bring their voice to biosimilar policies. Now, we'll give you the information and tools that you'll need to ensure that what's best for patients is at the center of biosimilar policies.